I'm here with Karen Bird, the principal of Reindeer Lake School in South End, Saskatchewan. Thank you for joining us today.
Yes, you're welcome.
Now, as a principal of a rather large school, what are some of the issues that you're seeing in Reindeer Lake?
In our northern community, it's not quite isolated, but it's quite a ways from here. Like in Saskatoon here, it's 8-hour drive to come here. And we don't have the accessibility for mental health counseling. They have to come out and do the counseling if there were some mental health issues. As a high school principal and elementary middle years principal, I get to talk to these kids. And I love that there's a freedom in that school and in the community where I can say, you know, can I pray for you? If there's something that I know that, you know, if you can talk about it, or if it's so much for that young person going through anxiety, going through depression, suicidal thoughts, what I know is to bring it to Jesus. And I think that's something that, you know, God has put me there. This is my 7th year going as an administrator. And I meet with a lot of young people, a lot of the parents in the community, and I'm from the community. I grew up in the community, so I know every kid in that school. I know every parent. I might forget some student names, you know, but I know where they come from. And I guess dealing with depression, suicide, that's a deep, you know, that's a deep thing that a lot of the young people won't just come out and tell you, this is what I'm thinking of doing. But just having that discernment, you know, going to work and say, Lord, you know, give me the discernment to who to say hello to this morning. It's going to be okay. And I just having that a prayer life like that, and being there for the kids.
Help us to understand the depression issue in young people and the feeling that life is not worth living. Help us to understand why that is such a struggle in communities. As
young people, you think this is it. You don't see how your life is going to be in the future. You're not there yet. You're not an adult yet. So whatever they have under the understanding, the knowledge that they have about life, this is all they're putting their eggs into this basket. And not having that hope, and the hope is Jesus, the hope is in God. You know, the enemy lies to these young people, like life is never going to get any better. And there's times I feel in South End that life is not going to get any better in a reserve, a small Indian reserve of, I think, 1,200 people. If you look at the lack of things that you have in your life and in a community, you're going to start losing your hope. And you have to keep telling the people the positive messages that you're not always going to stay here. You're going to do many things. You're going to go out there. We don't have that in our community where you have university classes, a community college. We don't have that. But that's not something that should keep you here. You can move on. And if you want to live in a city, you can do that.
Have you lost some of your students to suicide?
We've lost my niece a couple years ago, I think, was that 2 or 3 years ago, to suicide. There was a lot of challenges in her life. She never came to me. I'd say hi and that, but I knew there was things because she wasn't coming to school too, and we'd have the guidance go and talk to her. Yeah, I'll come to school, but she never did. And it was to the point where it had a lot to do with her relationship. I guess that was the last straw for her in her life. And there have been other suicides in our community that, you know, they come from a good family. How could have this happened? But I guess that's something that it's an inner struggle. It's an inner thing that when young people don't, not only young people, young adults too, and a lot of times drugs and alcohol play a big part in that, because that's what they use as their coping mechanism. But that only works for that little time, and it's not a long term. It doesn't work long term.
You talk about hope, and I want to hear your story of how you found that hope. You found Jesus after your husband came to know the Lord. Tell us about that story.
I had a feeling I had God in my life since I was a little girl. I know His presence. I just didn't have a personal relationship with Him. And when I was a young married woman, I wasn't happy. I know I needed God. And I started looking, and I know my husband was in the same boat where he was looking. He found Jesus first before I did. So after he found Jesus, I didn't like I didn't like how he changed. It's like I didn't understand, and I would fight him, because that's what you do. The world will fight the Jesus in you. It's not you that they fight. And I know that he kept praying for me, and soon after I accepted the Lord too on my birthday. In August. I found Jesus, and I felt like the weight of the world had lifted from me. Whatever I had gone through, Jesus took. And just, I felt like I was in the clouds. When I first accepted the Lord, I felt the Holy Spirit come in me, and it was such a beautiful feeling, and I never want that to leave. And I felt so clean, like I've never done anything wrong. You know, just the Lord helping me in my life. I know I wanted to be a better mother to my 3 kids at the time, and 2 boys and a girl. Just had my girl, and we had just both lost our brothers at that year too. So I was going through grief, and I wanted God to take that grief from my life because it was overtaking me. And there's times where I would cry on to God and say, God, take this. I can't go on like this, and just cry. I need to be here for my children. I need to be here for my husband. I was a stay-at-home mom. And I know that Jesus had given me, as we read the Word together, I would read the Word to my husband. I knew that there was bigger and better things for us. And I always had that dream since I was a little girl, that I was going to do a lot of good things in my life to help others.
You spoke to me about not wanting to repeat the past because you grew up in a tumultuous home.
Yes.
Tell us about the home you grew up in.
Ever since I could remember, there was a party in my house. Always a party in my house. And I knew that this wasn't a good life. People screaming, people hurting each other. I knew that was not the life for me. And this is the life my parents knew. But you know what? I knew in my heart as a little girl, I'm going to have a better life. I'm going to have a big family. I'm going to be married. I'm going to have a good job. And I'm going to have a big house. I'm going to have lots of dogs. And not reserved dogs. And I've done a lot of, most of that, you know. And I guess having the love of Jesus in my life helped me forgive my parents too. It was a big thing for me to go over when I was a new Christian, because there are so many things that happen that it could really kill a person inside if you focus on that. Instead, I just gave it to God, and it was like roots pulled out of me. Just a lot of things that were happening in my excuse me, I have a tear. A lot of things that were happening in my life, I had to give it to Jesus.
What would be that message that you can give maybe to other people in your community who feel like they don't have hope?
The hope that you can find in this world is the hope in Jesus Christ. And that's your hope in the everlasting, because we will live eternally. And that's something that we're faced with in a small communities, death. Like right now, we are facing with a death in our community. But we don't live forever on this earth, but we live forever. And the hope that we have in Jesus is to have that salvation, to have Jesus in your life. And that's what makes a difference in your life. No matter what you go through in life, when you give it to Jesus, when Jesus is by your side, and you know, and with the Holy Spirit's help, going through whatever that you need to go through, that's the hope. He gives you the hope, the eternal hope. And you can do all things. You can do all things through Him. Because us doing it alone, we won't last long. Yeah.